Why I always make mistakes. Anya often wondered why her English journey felt like a perpetual uphill battle, riddled with countless stumbles and awkward pauses. Every attempt to speak felt like walking on thin ice, constantly fearing the inevitable slip-up that would expose her perceived inadequacies. This persistent apprehension stifled her voice completely, making real progress seem impossible. She vividly recalled moments in class or with native speakers where a simple sentence seemed to crumble into a heap of grammatical errors and mispronounced words. The sheer embarrassment would wash over her, leaving a bitter taste of defeat and reinforcing her belief that she was simply not cut out for language acquisition, no matter how hard she tried. This pervasive feeling of always making mistakes became a heavy burden, weighing down her aspirations and diminishing her self-confidence dramatically. It prevented her from actively participating in discussions, from truly expressing her thoughts, and from connecting with others in a language she deeply admired, creating a cycle of frustration. Her mind would race with perfect sentences, perfectly articulated thoughts in her native tongue, but the moment she tried to translate them into English, everything disintegrated. The right words vanished, grammar rules became tangled knots, and her tongue felt impossibly heavy, refusing to cooperate with her intentions. The question, why I always make mistakes, echoed relentlessly in her mind, a constant self-interrogation that offered no answers, only deeper despair. She felt trapped in a loop of imperfection, convinced that fluency was a distant, unattainable dream reserved only for those with a natural knack for languages, which she lacked. Public speaking in English, even in a small group, was an absolute nightmare for Anya. Her heart would pound, palms would sweat, and her throat would tighten, making her voice barely a whisper. The fear of judgment, of missteps, paralyzed her, robbing her of the chance to grow and improve through interaction. She observed others speaking English with ease, fluidity, and confidence, and a pang of envy would strike her. They seemed to possess some magical ability she was missing. Anya desperately wanted that freedom, that effortless flow, but the path to achieving it seemed shrouded in impenetrable fog and endless pitfalls. Every new grammar rule or vocabulary word she learned felt like adding another brick to an already unstable tower. The more she knew, the more she feared misapplying it. This overwhelming pressure to be perfect before even trying to speak was ironically her biggest barrier to actually improving and progressing. The idea of how to think and speak simultaneously felt like an advanced concept, far beyond her current grasp. She often translated word for word from her native language, a process that was slow, cumbersome, and riddled with errors, preventing any natural flow or spontaneous conversation, hindering true linguistic development. Anya yearned for a breakthrough, a clear strategy, or even a simple piece of advice that would genuinely help her overcome this crippling fear of making mistakes and finally unlock her true potential in English. She knew there had to be a different approach than just memorizing rules and vocabulary endlessly. One quiet evening, while scrolling through educational videos, a profound realization struck her. True progress doesn't come from avoiding mistakes, but from embracing them wholeheartedly as essential stepping stones. This simple truth began to shift her entire perspective on language learning, offering a glimmer of hope she desperately needed. She understood that every native speaker, every fluent individual, had once been a beginner, stumbling and fumbling just like her. The difference wasn't a lack of mistakes, but a willingness to persist despite them. This insight was a powerful antidote to her self-defeating mindset, providing a much-needed mental reset. The key, she learned, wasn't to magically eliminate errors, but to develop resilience and learn from each one. Mistakes were not failures, they were invaluable feedback mechanisms. This fresh perspective was like opening a window in a stuffy room, letting in a breath of fresh air and renewed determination for her. Anya decided it was time to change her strategy completely, moving away from passive learning to active, brave engagement. The first, most crucial step, she realized, was to start talking at home, in a safe, judgment-free zone where imperfections were not only allowed but actively encouraged for genuine growth. Her bedroom became her new language laboratory, a sanctuary where she could experiment with sounds, words, and sentences without the crippling fear of external scrutiny. This dedicated personal space provided the perfect environment for her to shed inhibitions and begin her authentic journey towards verbal fluency. Her initial attempts were awkward, even comical, speaking to herself in the mirror, describing mundane objects around her room. "This is a lamp. It gives light. The light is bright," she'd articulate slowly. It felt silly, but slowly, surely, her vocal cords began to cooperate, and words began to form more easily. She started by narrating her daily activities aloud. "I am making coffee. The water is boiling now. I need to pour it carefully." This seemingly simple exercise built foundational muscle memory and allowed her to connect actions with English phrases in a natural, organic way, strengthening her command of vocabulary. Anya discovered the immense power of consistent, private dialogue. She'd describe her clothes, the weather outside, or even her thoughts on a book she was reading. This internal monologue, externalized, became a vital component of her English study plan for talking, making it truly effective and practical for daily use. Pets became her unwitting conversation partners. Her cat, Whiskers, listened patiently as Anya described her day or simply practiced simple greetings. "Good morning, Whiskers. How are you today?" It felt less intimidating than speaking to a person, providing a low-stakes environment for consistent verbal practice. Reading aloud to herself was another foundational step. She started with simple children's books, then moved to short stories, focusing on pronunciation and rhythm. This improved her articulation and helped her internalize sentence structures naturally, building a solid base for more complex expressions in conversations. She realized that consistent, even brief, periods of speaking practice at home were far more effective than sporadic, high-pressure attempts in public. It was about building stamina and confidence in a controlled environment first, before venturing into more challenging social interactions and situations. A crucial part of her new approach was understanding how to learn English not as a collection of rules, but as an immersive experience. She began to treat English less like a subject to be studied and more like a living, breathing entity to be explored and embraced with curiosity and enthusiasm. Anya found immense joy and effectiveness in learning English through stories. She started devouring audiobooks, listening intently to the natural flow of conversations and the nuances of expression. The narratives captivated her, making the learning process feel less like a chore and more like an enjoyable adventure. She'd choose stories that genuinely interested her, from classic literature to modern thrillers, making the learning process engaging and personal. This intrinsic motivation was key to her consistency and her ability to absorb new vocabulary and grammatical structures effortlessly, integrating them into her active use. After listening, she would try to retell the stories in her own words, first silently, then aloud. This active recall and reconstruction of narratives significantly boosted her comprehension and her ability to generate coherent sentences on the fly, transforming passive input into active output and practical fluency. Anya started using a technique called shadowing, repeating lines immediately after the narrator, mimicking their intonation, speed, and pronunciation. This direct imitation was incredibly powerful for refining her accent and rhythm, making her speech sound more natural and less forced, significantly improving her delivery. She also found great benefit in English story reading beyond just listening. Physically reading the text allowed her to connect written words with spoken sounds, reinforcing spelling and visual recognition. This multisensory approach cemented her learning, making it more comprehensive and durable over time. Sometimes, she would even act out dialogues from the stories, assigning herself different characters and practicing their lines with varying emotions. This playful approach made the learning process fun and dynamic, helping her to embody the language rather than just intellectually understand its mechanics. Anya discovered that the emotional connection to stories made vocabulary stick much better than rote memorization. Words learned in context, within a compelling narrative, became part of her active vocabulary, readily available for use in her own conversations and spontaneous expressions, enriching her daily speech. She started keeping a small notebook dedicated to new words and phrases encountered in stories, along with their contextual usage. Reviewing these regularly, but always within the framework of the story, ensured they were retained effectively and could be smoothly integrated into her expanding lexicon and fluency. The simple act of enjoying stories transformed her entire outlook on how to practice English. It became less about rigid exercises and more about engaging with the language in a meaningful and entertaining way, making her learning journey sustainable and genuinely pleasurable every single day. Anya implemented a structured English study plan for talking, not just for grammar or vocabulary. Every day, she allocated specific time blocks for speaking practice, 10 minutes for daily narration, 15 for story retelling, and another 10 for role-playing scenarios, ensuring consistent progress and daily improvement. She designated different days for different types of speaking practice. Mondays for describing objects, Tuesdays for retelling stories, Wednesdays for imagining dialogues, and so on. This variety kept her engaged and ensured all aspects of speaking were being addressed systematically and comprehensively. One particularly effective method Anya embraced was self-dialogue. She'd ask herself questions in English and then answer them aloud, simulating a conversation. What are your plans for today? I plan to finish my book and then go for a walk. This prepared her for real-life interactions beautifully. She started recording her voice using her phone. Listening back to her own English, no matter how awkward it sounded initially, provided invaluable insights. She could identify pronunciation errors, grammatical slips, and areas where her fluency faltered, allowing for targeted correction and improvement in her speech. Initially, listening to her recorded voice was painful, highlighting every mistake. But Anya persevered, reminding herself that this was data, not judgment. Each recording became a benchmark, a measurable step forward, allowing her to track her progress and celebrate small victories in her journey. Anya also practiced how to think and speak more spontaneously by engaging in free talk sessions. She'd pick a random topic, set a timer for 5 minutes, and just talk, without stopping, about whatever came to mind, forcing her brain to formulate thoughts directly in English without translation. This free talk was challenging at first, riddled with pauses and repetitions, but over time, it trained her brain to access English vocabulary and grammar more rapidly and intuitively. It was a messy but essential step towards genuine fluency and conversational ease, building her confidence. She realized the importance of not just speaking, but also actively listening to herself. This metacognitive skill, listening critically to her own output, allowed her to self-correct in real time and after practice sessions, accelerating her learning curve significantly and improving her self-awareness. Anya also used online resources to find, let me tell you, talking tips from other successful learners. She experimented with different techniques, like tongue twisters for articulation or debating with herself on various subjects, adapting them to suit her personal learning style and preferences. One tip she found particularly useful was to break down complex thoughts into simpler English sentences. Rather than trying to convey an intricate idea perfectly, she focused on communicating the core message clearly, gradually building up complexity as her confidence and vocabulary grew naturally. She even started imagining conversations with native speakers she admired, like her favorite YouTubers or authors. She would mentally rehearse what she would say, anticipating their responses and formulating her replies, preparing her for real-world interactions and building practical conversational skills. The journey wasn't without its continued challenges. There were days when frustration crept back in, when she felt her progress was too slow, or when she still caught herself making familiar mistakes despite her best efforts and consistent practice. But now, instead of despair, Anya approached these moments with a different mindset. Another mistake, she would think, another opportunity to learn. This positive reframing was transformative, turning setbacks into valuable lessons and maintaining her motivation. She celebrated small victories, a sentence spoken without hesitation, a new phrase used correctly in context, or even just the courage to speak up when she previously would have remained silent. These small wins fueled her momentum and reinforced her belief in the process. Anya understood that fluency wasn't about achieving perfection, but about effective communication and growing confidence. The way of learning English, she discovered, was a dynamic, iterative process of continuous improvement, not a fixed destination to be reached quickly and then forgotten. Her English study plan for talking evolved over time, becoming more refined as she understood her strengths and weaknesses better. It was a living document, tailored to her needs, ensuring her practice remained relevant and challenging, pushing her towards greater fluency and proficiency. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, Anya's confidence soared. Her hesitations lessened, her vocabulary expanded, and her ability to think directly in English without translation became more natural, allowing for smoother, more spontaneous conversations with others. The fear of making mistakes had not vanished entirely, but it had significantly diminished. She now saw them as guideposts, not roadblocks, indicators of areas needing more practice, rather than signs of failure, making her less anxious and more receptive to learning. Anya began joining online English-speaking groups and even attended local meetups. What once felt impossible now felt exciting. She found herself engaging in real conversations, contributing thoughts, and connecting with people from diverse backgrounds, truly enjoying the process. She still practiced diligently at home, but now it was driven by joy and curiosity, not fear. Her internal dialogue in English became richer, more articulate, a testament to her consistent effort and the effectiveness of her tailored learning approach, building genuine fluency. Her journey showed her that anyone can learn to speak English fluently, regardless of their starting point or past struggles. It requires patience, persistence, and, most importantly, a willingness to embrace imperfection as an integral part of the learning process itself. So, if you often ask yourself why I always make mistakes, remember Anya's story. Start talking at home, immerse yourself in English through stories, and implement a consistent English study plan for talking. Your voice is waiting to be heard. Let me tell you talking tips: be patient with yourself, celebrate every small improvement, and never let the fear of imperfection stop you from speaking. Your fluency journey is unique, and every word spoken is a step towards your ultimate goal. Embrace the process, enjoy the stories, and talk, talk, talk. You've got this. The world is waiting to hear your unique voice. Remember, the journey from "Why I Always Make Mistakes" to "I Speak English Confidently" begins with one courageous word spoken at home. Take that first step today and witness your transformation unfold wonderfully.